Bon vespre, good evening. I would like to welcome Peter Wilson to the headquarters of the Col·legi d'Arquitectes de Catalunya, the house of the architects and the architecture here in Barcelona. We are especially pleased to host you and we appreciate your willingness to pronounce your lecture today. Agraeixo la vostra presència aquesta tarda, especialment els que havíeu programat venir ahir a la tarda i que no hem tingut que moure la data per qüestions irresolubles vinculades amb l'aviació. És un plaer per a nosaltres que Peter Wilson avui pugui donar-nos la conferència al col·legi després que ahir aquesta vaga ens impedís fer-ho. Voldria agrair especialment a la Fundació Mies van der Rohe l'haver-nos fet possible aquesta conferència avui i serà precisament Ivan Blasi el que ens introduirà el ponent. Moltes gràcies.
Hola, bona tarda. És un plaer poder presentar el premi aquí al Col·legi d'Arquitectes. Good evening. We are here today because, as you know, the European Union Prize for Contemporary Architecture has been taking place in Europe, and it is based here in the city of Barcelona since 1988. But we had never had the opportunity to present it publicly, and although it is really recognized worldwide, probably here in the city of Barcelona, not so many people know about it. So it is important that we can also explain and participate with some of the jury members in presenting not only their work, but their way of understanding our profession or architecture nowadays, so that we can also improve the quality of the prize itself. So a prize that was born, as I was saying, in 1988 with the support from the very beginning of the European Commission through the organization done by the foundation and with the support as well of the Town Hall of Barcelona. In 2013 we celebrated the 25th anniversary, and a new period, a new phase has now begun. There has also been changes with the direction of the foundation, now under the directorship of Giovanna Carnevali, and a new team which has also with members from the previous one. And well, this has meant that we would like to present the prize here in Barcelona, and that's why we are also collaborating with other institutions such as the architecture school. There were even people who have been nominated this year for the prize, local architects who were calling and they didn't know about this prize directly, so we were kind of explaining them that it was based here in Barcelona and giving them some more information, because of course all of us may remember the winners, the 13 winners that there have been until today, but it's not only about the winners, which are just let's say maybe even a detail, but it's also about understanding what has been happening every 2 years in architecture, in the transformation of cities, in the improvement of our spaces through the selection that the juries have been doing all these years. We, through the prize, through the foundation and with the European Commission, we also bring the results of the nominations, the shortlisted projects, the winners and the emerging architects to different events in Europe, in different cities and different institutions, associations, but also to a series of events such as the Shenzhen Biennale in China, the Venice Biennale this year, and so that people, not only Europe, but everywhere around the world, in the States as well with the MoMA, where we were 2 years ago, they can also understand what is happening, and they can get to know what architects are doing, are building over here. Remember that this is a prize that speaks about architecture, not about the architects themselves. So what wins is a piece of architecture which has been built in the European territory in the previous 2 years. And it's not only about the architecture, but also about the process. And so we also support the client and all the stakeholders, all the people who are involved in all this process. So of course we have an advisory board and a series of institutions who support us when taking decisions, when deciding, for example, who the jury members should be. And we had little doubts about deciding that Peter Wilson should be with us in this year within the jury of the prize. So now they're having, several of them are also over here today with us, and they're having quite an interesting and tough time with many hours deciding on all the 420 works which have been nominated. Remember that people cannot, or architects cannot present their works, but there are independent experts that present them. And then the jury goes through all of them and makes a short list of around 40 projects, and 5 of which are finalists. These works are visited by the jury members. Afterwards, we will have lectures by the 5 finalists over here in Barcelona on May 7th, and we invite you already now to save the date, because it will be really interesting, because after these 5 presentations on May 7th, the jury will decide who is the winner, and we will also announce on the 8th who is the emerging architect, with a celebration and an opening of an exhibition on May 8th. So, of course, I was speaking a little bit about Peter Wilson, as we all agreed in having him. Many of us had known their work, Peter Bowles and Wilson, through some magazines, through the COAC, where you were with Gigantes and Zengelis. You were building at the same time. They were building the Checkpoint Charlie when you were building housing building with OMA, when you were building the library probably, then you built the Rotterdam Luxor Theater. So drawings like the ones that we are seeing over here were already quite present for a certain generation of us which were just beginning, and for sure for many other architects who may be now over here. So it's a pleasure for us that you're in the jury and that you can make this presentation as well. And I also just want to last in, there will be also a presentation by another jury member, the chair, who is Chino Zucchi, at the ITSAP, at the Barcelona Architecture School, on Monday at 7:30. Okay? So I also invite you to participate there. So nothing else. Thank you very much, Peter.
Okay. Thank you very much for the invitation to speak here. It's a great honor to be on the jury of the Mies van der Rohe Prize. I was asked for my lecture here in Barcelona. I apologize to any of you who came to my lecture last night, which was not possible because my plane was delayed for 4 hours. I was asked to speak about the urban projects of Bowles and Wilson. I've put a number of projects together under the title Scenographic Urbanism. I'm a little bit nervous about this title because scenographic implies perhaps an overemphasis on the visual. The scenographic also implies or also encompasses the technique we use for designing and for presenting. The first image on the one on the screen is one of my hand drawings, which is a very small urbanistic proposition. It was done for an exhibition in Berlin. Every year in Berlin there's an exhibition where architects are invited to do a sketch. The exhibition is called 40 by 40, which is the size of a serviette in a restaurant. And the idea is that the architects sketch while eating. Each year there's a theme for this exhibition. I'll explain this one in a little bit of detail. The theme for this exhibition was the reconstruction of the Schloss in Berlin. The Schloss was the former Kaiser's palace, a very big political issue. Should one reconstruct a Kaiser's palace in a contemporary democratic city? I think the question is not so much about political precedent, but about the question of historical roots. A country like Germany, which was, where cities, which our historical memory was, where most cities were obliterated in the Second World War. It's a very big question to actually rebuild historic buildings. As you may know, the Schloss in Berlin is being reconstructed after competition by an Italian architect in a highly rational style with a few Baroque details on the facade. An exhibition about this exercise required, from my point of view, to make a comment on what is happening there. Interesting, this is the museum island in Berlin, the museum by Schinkel. This is the center of the East Berlin, the communist city. And the question here was what to do with this park here. If you look closely at this drawing, one sees here two giant feet. I had read at this time a description by Arata Isozaki about a Japanese temple with two giant footprints, which Isozaki said, according to Japanese mythology, were the footprints of a giant invisible Buddha. I like this idea very much, that a giant invisible Buddha walks through the city. The question was, who would be the giant invisible Buddha in Berlin? Is it Aldo Rossi controlling the rational architecture here, or are there other ghosts haunting Berlin? I've explained this in a bit more detail than I can the other images, but I want to talk here about the idea of drawing a city, drawing a city by hand, of actually studying every building, and that drawing then becoming projective, it becoming a speculation what the city could be. The second illustration is a page from my notebook, a page done obviously when in Italy, recording different aspects of Rome, a bus ticket, a statue, and a 12th century map of the city. The third is to do with research I'm involved in at the moment, to do with to do with Italy, to do with travels to Italy. This is my sketched repaintings of drawings done in the 18th century of Rome. The point of both pictures is the quality of light in Italy. For some reason, Italy reoccurs in almost every slide, every image. This is another 18th century image, a page from my notebook. This is like a catalogue of things to see in Rome. And you all know Piranesi as a reference to the city plan. The city plan as palimpsest, as layering of different architectural typologies. I'm talking here about different ways of seeing or reading the city. We recently discovered in Italy, we discovered an exhibition on Aldo Rossi, and to my surprise I found in the exhibition Aldo Rossi's Pinocchio. This is my painting of Aldo Rossi's life-size puppet of Pinocchio. I think some of us architects find the inspiration in different places. I think the fact that Aldo Rossi perhaps shared his office with a life-size wooden Pinocchio interests me very much. Another sketch from my notebook, obviously Florence. These are all recordings of cities or traditional scenography of cities. This is a speculation. I think we're no longer living in the historic city. We're living in the age of Google and the age of information beamed by satellites. This is a sketch entitled Google Earth Italy Headquarters. I think the fact that we now have a perception which is transferred to technology, which gives us a totally different orientation and relation to landscape, is a possible theme for architecture. This is like an iterative landscape, and obviously Italian landscape being reflected by a facade which is itself a landscape. This is, I apologize for going so quickly through these images, but this is the introduction to my lecture. Still in Italy, my generation of architects grew up reading Norberg Schultz's Genius Loci, the idea of place in the city. I recently reread Genius Loci, and rather than making quotes from it, I decided to try to put the whole, every illustration in the book on one page of my notebook. This is a very absurd exercise. Each of these little images is about 8 millimeters by 8 millimeters, but it's to do with scenographic research. I would now like to show the first project, which is also by chance in Italy. I'm very sorry Chino Zucchi is not here, our chairman of the jury. Oh, Chino, good, this is for you. Work in progress. This is a competition which the Office of Bolus and Wilson won in Perugia, Monteluce, Perugia. A competition we won 5 years ago. The situation, quite extraordinary. The city of Perugia has its center here, and connected to the historic city center is a plateau called Monteluce. It was a 12th century monastery. Also, my generation of architects grew up quoting Italian cities as being the model for urban space, and we never imagined ourselves doing surgery on Italian cities of this value. So Monteluce, Perugia. This is the monastery of Monteluccio, which became a hospital in the 19th century. Also the site for an international competition which our office won. This is my first sketch, a scenographic sketch done on the aeroplane flying back from my site visit. One sees the organizational principles of the monastery, a facade, a gate, an entrance, already sketching possible building types within the precinct of the monastery. For this competition, because the topography, because the heights were so extreme, it was impossible to design in plan. We have a wood workshop in our office, and we made a 1 to 200 scale model of the whole site and basically did the design on the model, which is another form of scenography. It's like making a mock-up of a stage set. For this model, we developed all sorts of tree types which we felt were particularly appropriate for an Italian landscape. I think in the end we won this competition because of the model, and our model was very big. All the others had little 1 to 500 models. It's always worthwhile breaking the rules in a competition that you're taking part in. But you can see with this model we are actually thinking ourselves inside this landscape, this topography. This is, after winning the competition, a sketch of the whole new urban quarter we are now planning, we are now building. One sees the monastery entrance here, and our winning entry was for one piazza here, one historic building left here, and a second piazza here. Buildings left and right, and then the topography falls away on both sides. This is the actual situation, the center of Perugia, Monteluccio, which is connected by a road on top of the ridge. It says here Monteluccio. This is our winning entry in the competition. It looks very simple, just a few red shapes, but the whole point was that each of these new buildings is built on the location of a demolished hospital building. The site is very steep with lots of retaining walls and lots of protected trees. Our intention was to keep all the trees and to keep the retaining walls. So if we only build on the sites of demolished buildings, we have a much easier building program. Wrong way. Yes. The bright red buildings are the ones which our office is building, and these are the ones that are now being built by younger Italian officers. Much easier with the keyboard. This is a section from our competition drawings. One sees here that for Monteluccio, the section is all important. Our strategy was right on top of the hill to build 2 levels of parking, and on top of the parking, a piazza. This means there are no cars on the site. The cars drive straight into the garage and have disappeared. Then on either side of the piazza, new buildings. This one is a supermarket with offices on top. Here's a hotel. Another section through the car park with a conference building here balanced on the edge of the hill. Another section, the same conference building, and one of the smaller buildings now being built by younger Italian architects. A section through the second piazza, which has a staircase rising up to a terrace with views out across the valley. We'll see that in a minute. We discovered in Perugia there's a typical urban form, which is to have public spaces open on one side with a view across the valley. This is a technique which we ourselves integrated into our planning. This is our staircase leading up to a terrace and a view across the valley to Assisi on the other side, this beautiful Umbrian landscape. These buildings, as you can see, are not quite finished yet, but it will be open, I think, in 1 year's time. Again, the model, these are the residential buildings now being planned by other officers. Those were our plans for those buildings from the competition. This is the second piazza with the stair leading up to the terrace here, in a higher building here. The same situation in construction. And from the outside, this is the second piazza, the terrace here, and this building has 3 floors which use the topography. This building is a layered building, different programs, shops at piazza level, government offices below, a kindergarten on the lower level. That same building during construction with the historic skyline of Perugia in the background. Back to the model. Now I want to show you the first piazza here. In the first piazza, there is one building which is looking out from, the building itself is looking, or it's a building which looks like it's looking. This was originally a conference center, but now because of the economic crisis, it's become a fitness center. This is one of the few renderings I will show you in my lecture. Nearly all the drawings I'm showing are hand drawings. Maybe a word about scenographic drawing or scenographic thinking. And we find hand drawings are a much better medium to communicate with our clients. The hand drawing, the client knows that he's talking to the author of the drawing. The hand drawing is not perfect like a rendering. A rendering is finished and it shines. But for a client, it's very off-putting. It's finished and unchangeable. The hand drawings, in the other hand, this is not a hand drawing, this is a half-built building. This is also a rendering. Shiny, happy people enjoying cafe life. Same cafe space. And the original design sketches. Same building, rendering, construction site. Now we leave Perugia. I want to show now a few scenographic studies of different cities to demonstrate our technique of recording cities. This is my drawing of Taipei in Taiwan. I think my feeling is that different cities, or each city has a character, and one tries to capture that character in drawings, and then perhaps if one is working on that city to move on from that drawing style to a projection technique which allows one to design within the character that one has discovered. That was Sheffield in England, ex-industrial city, Istanbul. This is Dresden in Germany, where we were working with developers to develop a scenario, and these hand-drawn drawings of mine were used by the developers to present the scenario to the city, which they accepted for a whole new quarter in Dresden. This is Münster, the city where our office is based. A suggestion of ours to the city to introduce a giant clock at the end of one street, or a drawing in Krakow of a church. These drawings are all from my notebooks, which I carry with me my whole time. They're like my personal archive. A drawing of Rotterdam in the Netherlands. I would like to show now some projects in Rotterdam. We spent quite a long time building in Rotterdam. Our first project there was a waterfront, a quay, a pier on the edge of the River Maas. This was our design model. The whole ground plane here is actually a new building. It's a building standing on legs in the river. Oh, maybe we go back. One sees a set of equipment here. The first one is this little triangular building, then a long beam, and these red objects here, which are urban furniture. These were all buildings to do with the harbour function. The triangular building is called the Bridge Watcher's House. In that building, there are harbour technicians who open and close all the lifting buildings in Rotterdam. Let me go on. This is the Bridge Watcher's House on its site. This is on the harbour side of the city, facing the city centre in Rotterdam, a new urban development area. It's called the Kop van Zuid, the head of the south. One can see at this stage, 10 years ago, there was one big government office building built, and our beam here and our Bridge Watcher's House here. And these buildings at this stage are almost like urban acupuncture. They're very small insertions which are meant to give a particular atmosphere or to signal the urban development that will happen. This is the bridge watcher's house. The bridge watchers had to be at a height of 12 meters, which is, I think, the height of ship captains when they sail their ships past. We like this idea very much, an analog relationship of bridge watcher to ship's captain. But in fact, the bridge watchers sit with their backs to the window and watch the whole harbour on their radar screen, so they actually have a digital relationship to the harbour, or they have a virtual harbour that they're controlling. A drawing of the bridge watcher's house and its landscape site. We discovered in Rotterdam that each pier has a number, and when ships can no longer stop, they lose their number. So we here planned a garden which we called the Garden of Lost Numbers, which is the different numbers of this key, so as if they were thrown across the quay. This is a drawing, one of our last drawings before we started using computer drawings. So it's obviously mid-1990s, with the bridge watcher's house, the quay here, this long beam building. This was a drawing done for a workshop we did together with the city planning office and the traffic office. Here we were discussing with the city what to do with all the traffic and what to do with this connection of two different urban zones. There's here the government offices had been built, and here's the Wilhelmina Pier with what became a tower by Renzo Piano here, and Rem Koolhaas's huge towers at the top here. We came up here with the scenario of this red object in the middle, which we called a hinge object, which does not belong to either quarter. It's a building which allows this change of direction in the city. Again, scenographic. We'll come back to that in a minute. This is our bridge watcher's house from the other side. It's white on one side, yellow on one facade, and black on the other. One sees it here standing very lonely, very poetic in the frozen harbour of Rotterdam. Here, 10 years later, one sees it's no longer standing alone. It has a tower right next to it, and the Renzo Piano Tower in the background, and the bridge by Ben van Berkel further in the background. If we zoom in more closely, one sees that it still has its urban anchoring function. It is still a small icon in the city. One sees here also that it grows out of the quay. The quay is like the base of the building, and then it folds up and out. This is the bridge watchers at their height of 12 meters. And it has also grown in the meantime other small pieces of equipment. This, in the foreground here, is a very dangerous landing stage to get off water taxis and onto the land, designed by a friend of ours, the Dutch architect Victor Mani. We were very happy that our building got such good neighbours. And also in the background here, these towers had grown in the meantime. We came back after 10 years to Rotterdam to find our little lonely building suddenly crowded by a very big neighbour. We were very pleased to see that the Dutch architect respectfully had made their building get darker at the bottom to give our building a good background, a black background. This is our quay with the landscape objects, these big white stones. These were unspecified pieces of street furniture, and we didn't make any specification how they should be used. We did see once or twice visiting Rotterdam couples having their wedding photos taken standing on these stones, which I think is fantastic. When objects like this cause people to use them as a stage for one of the most important moments of their life. These stones are stones are also have also been integrated into the city by generations of school kids who graffiti on them, so that they have also become registers of the life of the city. I think this is also part of scenographic urbanism. It's to do with the city or the city describing its own processes or its processes of occupation. I want to talk about this process of inscription actually not the next project, but one project after that. First, back to this drawing. This is the same drawing, but you'll see this object has changed now. It is no longer a diagram, it has become a building. After we finished the urban study for this crossroads, the city of Rotterdam decided to build a theatre on this site. They organized an international competition. International meant 4 Dutch architects plus our office being German. The Dutch architects were Hermann Herzberger, Rem Koolhaas, Kees Christians, and one other. We were lucky enough to win that competition. It was a very dangerous thing to do, to win against Rem Koolhaas in his own city. It was almost life-threatening. This is the theatre, or the object which resulted, the Luxor Theatre. As you can see, it still has its hinging function. It's a building which has no hard corners. It's a building which is also, one must say now in retrospect, that the program was too big for the site. And the site is also very curious because every side of the site is front. It had no back, and theatres always have a front of house and back of house. But this is a building which needed a 360-degree facade. It has one facade which grows out of the fly tower, wraps around this side, around the other side, and back in here, and then wraps inside the foyer of the theatre. The problem with the program being too big for the site meant that the stage, the auditorium, had to be at first floor level so that the ground level could be public functions, lobbies, etc. The stage is at this height. And also to fit it on the site, we had to rotate the theatre so that the back of house, the changing rooms, became the front of house here. So the actors in their changing rooms get the best view. Another function of this theatre was that the Luxor only has visiting shows, which means they have lots of trucks which come every week and deliver stage sets, and the show stays for 2 or 3 nights and then travels on. So it had to be possible to park 3 very big trucks at stage level, which was a problem because the stage is at first floor. There were a number of solutions to this. Hermann Herzberger built or planned a truck lift behind the theatre to lift the truck up to the stage level. But they knew in Rotterdam that this was very expensive. You have to have a lift man permanently standing beside the lift as a safety officer. Rem Koolhaas solved the problem by moving the building off the site and putting it in the harbour. Of course he can, it's his city. We solved the problem by deciding that the trucks had to drive through the building, or they had to drive into the building, and then up a truck ramp, out over the harbour, and back in next to the stage. So all the curves of this theatre are based on the turning circles of trucks. When we won this competition, the Dutch press said it's just a piece of German functionalism, which I think means that it works, which is apparently unusual in Holland. We were very happy to be called functionalists. Here you see trucks which have driven into the building and backed up here, parking beside the stage. We've been told by theatre people that it's the best functioning theatre in Holland. What we like about this image is that it shows this layering of different types of space: representative space, the restaurant in here, functional space for the delivery, representative space for the main foyer with the view of the harbour. It's also possible to come by boat or by taxi boat here to go to the theatre. But I'm talking tonight about urban strategies, not about individual buildings, so I won't show any more of the Luxor. I wanted to talk about this idea of inscription, the surface of the city. I showed the rocks in Rotterdam before. This is a sketch from my notebook of Freiburg in Germany. In Freiburg there's a very interesting paving system with some images inscribed and a water channel crossing this square. Another sketch from Milano, the Piazza Duomo, of very interesting paving, people crossing it. Another ground surface inscribed or readable. Another landscape with text on it. This is the harbour in Hamburg, where at this moment there were lots of lumps of iron left lying around, and because there was a tower where you could look down on this site, people did very large-scale graffiti on the sand and wrote things for their girlfriends, etc. I like this very much, that the whole city becomes the field of inscription. So we're back in Rotterdam now. I've shown the quay here, the Luxor Theatre here. We're now at the other end of the Wilhelmina Pier here. We were commissioned by the city to landscape the outside spaces at the end of the quay here. There's a very famous hotel in Rotterdam, the Hotel New York, this building here. And behind it, a building by Norman Foster, the World Port Center, or something like that. We were asked, first of all, to give the end of the pier a shape. And we decided very quickly on this straight line, this straight edge, which is like an artificial horizon. The reason for this is that the Hotel New York is the former shipping company, Holland America Line. This is the point where millions of immigrants left Europe or for the last time stood on European soil, went on a ship and emigrated across the Atlantic to America. So this idea that we're talking here about a connection between Europe and America was interesting for us. So we developed a scenario, a Holland-America scenario. This is the situation. At that point, these towers were not built. This one is now Foster, and this one is Rem's very big building, this one Piano. We developed this idea that if the end of the pier was like a horizon, it should be as if you can look across this horizon and see the skyline of New York, or we imagined it like that. But that seemed a little bit too far-fetched, so we decided to move the horizon a bit closer to Holland, which meant that we developed this line here as dividing two types of urban space. Above this line we designated as Holland, and below the line is America. America is more like a prairie. It's a very wide open space. It's a field where anything could happen, even Kafka's Grand Oklahoma Circus. The important thing was with the Holland and America and the Holland-American border that so people would know where they were. We wrote Holland in the pavement on the Holland side in 6-meter high letters, and America on the American side in 6-meter high letters. It means that the Dutch people can ride their bicycle to America on the weekend and then back into Holland. And Holland is made from very small, intimate gardens, and America from wide open prairies. The wide open prairies were because we had to keep at least half of this site free for public events, for circuses maybe, or for spontaneous events maybe. Our inspiration was, of course, this famous drawing by Sol Steinberg of New York in the foreground, and across the horizon California, Pacific Ocean, Japan. And what we liked here was the way Steinberg had written on the streets, 9th Avenue, 10th Avenue, Hudson River, Jersey, etc., Kansas, Utah, Texas. This seemed to us to be a technique for planning a city as well. So we introduced our large letters for Holland. This is the construction of Holland, the H of Holland. This is a brave person about to step across the border into an unbuilt America. You can see the Dutch people here staying in Holland. We put up a windbreak. It's very, very windy in Holland, so we put a glass screen around the Dutch cafe so the Dutch people can be wind protected looking out across America. Underneath Holland, the Dutch garden, was a two-level car park by the office of Foster's from London. We were asked to provide ventilation towers for the Foster car park. We designed these two ship's funnels for their ventilation, and the Foster people refused to put our ship's funnels in their drawings. So as revenge, we named this the Foster Titanic effect. These funnels were built, and now the focus of the Dutch garden, ventilating Foster very nicely. These are two girls picnicking in the O of Holland, and one sees again in the background a couple having their wedding photographs taken on part of the Dutch garden, and the Foster Tower in the background. This is a Dutchman carefully looking after these small Dutch gardens. The ventilation from the car park. The border between Holland and America we marked with a tightrope for people who couldn't decide whether they wanted to be in Holland or America, so they could walk along the tightrope. As far as I know today, nobody has walked along it, but it's very useful for hanging party lights on. This is Holland before America was constructed, or maybe, no. There was a delay of 4 or 5 years between the construction of Holland and the construction of America. Finally, America was constructed. It was asphalted, and there was less money available then. This is the A of America, Lexington, like in the Sol Steinberg drawing, Utah, Los Angeles in fog, Canada in the north, the R of Holland and the L of Holland, the R of America. Our construction drawings giving the size of the plates for the writing. 6th Avenue in fog, 14th Street in fog, Madison in fog, 75th. This is a children's playground, half in Holland, half in America. So the children on the seesaw, they can seesaw up and down, one of them touching their feet or each one touching their feet on a different continent. And on the south side, Mexico, with a ramp leading down for taxi boats, perhaps for illegal immigrants as well. We were also asked to design a restaurant in the Dutch cafe side. This was the first, or the sketch for that restaurant. This is the serving pavilion of the Hotel New York Cafe. It's called Maaskant, which is the name of a modernist Dutch architect. Maaskant also means the edge of the river Maas, which is where we are. It's a building which had to serve on all 4 sides, so we designed a spider-like roof structure which suspended the roof of the pavilion. And these are happy Dutch people in the Dutch garden looking out across America on the weekend. I think I must say with this project, this was one of our first projects which we put under the title Scenographic Urbanism. It's complex in its narratives. I'm not sure whether people actually understand it as I explain it, but the scenario was important for us as architects to develop this complex set of forms. I forgot to say, right next to Canada is a sculpture. A sculpture by Jeff Wall, Canadian sculptor, called Left Luggage, which is also to do with immigrants. This was my drawing of redrawing of the Sol Steinberg drawing, which was the inspiration for the text on the ground, the graffiti on the ground. The type of drawing which we first started doing in Japan. This was a little sketch of sort of an overview or a summary of Tokyo. Tokyo we understand as a matrix of isolated incidents, not held together by formal geometries like Western cities. We mapped Tokyo, this is mid-90s, or mapped rooftops of Tokyo in this drawing, air conditioners, satellite dishes, water tanks, etc. Maybe I'll say more about this. What we discovered in Tokyo was that each block in the city is almost like the formula, the matrix for the whole city. One can find almost every city or every building type on each block. Maybe a high-rise tower, a pachinko parlor, a small private house. This idea of mixing together functions of this collision of functions interested us very much. We were at that time commissioned to build a very small building in Tokyo, a private house. This is the site. It is 5.5 by 7.5 meters, very small even for Tokyo standards. This image shows the start of construction. A Shinto priest explaining to the gods of the site what is going to happen. Our Japanese client, who's there in black, also told us that he explained to the gods of the site that the architect's name was Peter Wilson, and he put in place an invisible pipe for the gods to leave the site during construction. We were very impressed by this amount of respect for a very small piece of earth. And the resulting house is this one, the very much published Suzuki house, a little pixel in Tokyo. I don't want to explain that building in detail, but just to say that this idea of seeing the city or reading the city as a matrix of of autonomous bits. We re-imported to Europe and started doing drawings like this of the European landscape, with the urbanized landscape. And this drawing is done from a train riding across Germany, putting together this sequence of building types. And this sort of landscape one finds in Germany very much documented in the Ruhr district of Germany, where 5 or 6 cities have grown together. So one has this matrix, which one cannot say it's city, one cannot say it's landscape. It's basically an urbanized landscape, which is sometimes industrial, sometimes residential, sometimes preserved nature zones. I think this idea of a complex urban carpet was something which at that time seemed new in Europe. It appeared to us to be like Tokyo spread across the European landscape, maybe 10 times less dense than Tokyo, but the same matrix of equal distribution. We did a number of collages trying to explain this condition. You might know this one from the cover of El Croquis, an abstraction of a European landscape, actually drawn on a piece of paper which we made by tearing up a telephone book. This is a little sketch we did for a building type which might fit this sort of landscape. The Ruhr district of Germany used to be an industrial zone. They're now trying to become a cultural zone. But there are no cities within it which are focused enough to have the financial muscle to build any cultural institutions. We proposed here a mobile building, a cultural city hall which could be flown in by helicopter and dropped in different sites. So this is that little tower you saw being carried by helicopter, which has thrown out its skirt to make a cultural space. This is scenographic urbanism developing its own scenarios, or taking on a trajectory of its own. This is another map drawn from the mid-90s of the Ruhr in Germany. At that time, before we had satellite information, there was a network war going on, or in this region, a network war between rail companies and electricity suppliers, both of which had an in-place physical network and wanted to be media suppliers, but they were eclipsed by technological developments. At that time, in the mid-1990s, we organized a conference called the Verstattete Landschaft, which means the built landscape. This was for us a disaster. We as Bols and Wilson were seen as people who wanted to dissolve the city. You can see from the list of names here that they're Kleihuss, Kohlhoff, Neumeier. These were people who were at our conference. This is the Berlin Mafia, the high priests of urban blocks. The rest of the list, Neutlings, Prix, and myself, or Elias and Galis, were all of us non-Germans were the ones who were in favor of a whole new understanding of urban fields in the landscape. As a result of this competition, we as Bols and Wilson were put on the blacklist in Berlin and were not invited for Berlin competitions for 15 years after that. We still haven't managed to build a building in Berlin. But we are still interested in this concept of the urbanized landscape. In Italy, it's known as La Città Diffusa. This is a photograph of somewhere in Italy. This is a photograph of the Po Valley from an aeroplane, and the Po Valley in fog. And I think it's a question of which paradigm one uses to measure such spaces. And they obviously are not beautiful in a traditional sense, but seen from above at night, it looks like jellyfish. We also discovered that if you come down to ground level and if you defocus your eyes a little bit, there is a particular aesthetic in this sort of landscape. This is also photographed in northern Italy. Or this one, there's an underwater petrol station. With this one, I'm dissolving a German bridge. With these sort of strategic researches, and we've continued on our urban or scenographic urbanism. This is another recent 40 by 40 exhibition, a sketch of the government quarter of Berlin. This is the official residence of the German Chancellor, the German Parliament, the Reichstag, and offices for parliamentarians. The question here was, how could this quarter be finished or be completed? Does it need urban blocks, and our answer was no, it needs acupuncture points like this building, which was called a public forum, or a very lightweight building, whose function is not 100% designed. But if successful, it will have children in there. You see here lots of other little transparent pyramids spreading across Berlin. Scenographic urbanism. The city of material is obviously something we have grown up with and value very, very highly. The Uffizi, the fantastic urban stage. But what I like very much is the same space with a different form of documentation. This is a photograph of mine of the Uffizi at nighttime, where one sees that the incidents of the city, the particular sound of feet walking on pavement, etc., are as much a dimension of urbanism as the figure ground plan. We are also not entirely against solid buildings. I like very, very much this monster building from Chicago from the 1920s. What happens when Mr. Otis invents the elevator? Cars get flatter, it seems. We ourselves also occasionally, or not occasionally, quite regularly, when we're working in Germany, do buildings which have a sort of super materiality. This is a tower in Hamburg, also an urban plan where we won the urban master planning competition. You'll see the tower is not unlike Mises' triangular tower. This was our hope, at least. The same building from the other side. You can go one forward here. One can see the process of evolution here from scenographic sketch to, no, wrong way. Scenographic sketch to actual building. This tower is the center of an urban plan or a competition we won. The same tower from a different perspective. It's a building with changing personalities. You can see this building is all made from one particular brick. This is a favorite material of architects in Germany. It's a traditionally hand-fired brick which has a very rich, very rich surface texture. The same tower and other buildings, these are part of our design work for a sequence of urban spaces from the street outside to the inside of our site. The situation is in Hamburg. This is our site. It's a block interior, an industrial site. It was a factory for building and repairing buses and trams. It's in the middle of a residential area, Eppendorf, which is now the most expensive area of Hamburg. It's a very interesting piece of real estate for a developer. There was a competition to develop or for a master plan for this site, which our office won. This is our master plan. I think we won it because we kept one of the industrial sheds in the middle. We also kept small pieces of the brick architecture of the 19th century. We were also concerned with a network of spaces which connect urban districts on one side across the center of the site to a main shopping street on the other side, or the passage from a canal here up to the piazza in the center of our site. On this side, we decided to place high-density, low-rise housing, and because the density was so low there, we had to compensate with a tower in the middle, which is our own housing tower. I'll show some of the sketches we did while planning this scheme. That's our competition model, which was made with soap. Very easy to carve, but very problematic when one of the judges has a soap allergy and could not come within 10 meters of the model. but the other judges were very generous and gave us the first prize. This is the existing situation on this side, and one of our sketches for a scenographic interpretation. This is the facade of garages for buses, which we propose to be converted into row houses. This was done by other architects. We were the master planners and the supervisors for the whole development of this area. This is the bus garages becoming house fronts. This is the Hamburg office of Spenger Wischele, interpreting our master plan. Another sketch for an interior garden in here with playgrounds and old people's housing here. And we suggested here to have also row houses, new row houses, which were built by another Hamburg architect. So what we are doing here with our sketches, we are doing a sort of a choreography of spaces to be filled out by other architects. This was a sketch for an existing building, a sort of gatehouse, where we suggested the gatehouse could have a penthouse on top, which was built by another architect, and the existing industrial shed, which has now become a television station with our tower in the background. This is a close-up of the surface of our tower. There's this very rich brick material, also with the brick layers set forward and back to give it shadow lines in a sort of a super texture. One more project. I think I'm going on very long tonight. I must apologize for that. This is the city of Haarlem in Holland, a plan from the 16th century. We're talking about a site here on the edge of the city wall. This is a building project by Bolles and Wilson, which is part of the master plan by Dutch architects. The Dutch architects are called Kruivanger Urbis. Their master plan was to do a very dense urban neighborhood which tied in with the very small pattern of historic streets in Haarlem. Haarlem is the most historically preserved city in Holland, very difficult to build in. This is the building we built in Haarlem, which you see has a very rich brick texture like the building in Hamburg. One of our design sketches, the building built. This is the master plan by the Dutch architects was for, and all of this orange stuff is new. One sees the historic fabric here with small streets, and a very difficult piece of surgery to insert into a historic city such a large new project. We were lucky enough to be chosen to build the front building, or the mask that this whole new precinct wears. This is our mask, where we used detail and a complex building folding to break down the scale from the very big functional program. We were also asked to incorporate details of the historic building which had to be pulled down on this site for our building to be built. We were very happy with this, and we discovered all these cast iron elements which we incorporated into our facade. These are recycled cast iron elements. These are sculptures from the 1950s, which we were also asked to integrate. I think this idea of a building as a carrier of its own past is interesting here. It's this layering of the city. One sees here a stone arch from the old building, which we have not placed in our building, but placed in front to distinguish between new and old. We were only given one instruction by the city planners, which was, don't forget the clock tower and think Dudok. You know, Dudok is the modernist Dutch architect who built a town hall in Hilversum, so we studied Dudok and planned a clock tower. This is the integrated clock tower in the final block composition. An earlier sketch without clock tower, much less successful. A sketch where the clock tower is coming into existence. And the program here, the program of requirements is very complex. The plan at the top here is the below ground level, a cinema center. Above ground level was originally a casino, but the casino did not get planning permission. The casino became City Hall, which for us was very interesting. It means gamblers and politicians are exchangeable. This is the ground level, which has the entrance to the cinema center and also a passage through for this urban networking. And also the entrance to a huge underground car park with 4 lanes, which have to drive into our the cars have to drive into our building. This is the passage through our block, which we like to think of as being like Perugia or like an Italian city, especially on a foggy Dutch morning. It's often foggy in Perugia. Same passage. This is during the construction. The Dutch are very good at very big engineering projects. Haarlem is close to the North Sea. I think it lies 5 meters below sea level. So when they dug out the hole for the underground parking garage, and it would automatically fill with water, so the Dutch chose to actually build underwater. This is the construction site, building the underground car park. They flooded the whole site and concreted underwater, which is quite extraordinary. I think this idea of a performance or of the theatre of construction is something which was done here to a degree which we didn't think possible. Curiously, our site is the only dry part of the site at the front. The two levels of underground car park and underground cinema, I think that's one of the cinemas there which we're looking into. And when the building is finished, one looks across the rooftop skyline of Haarlem to the Church of St. Bavo, which many of you will know from the paintings of Drysdale. There's a very well-known historic urban silhouette. And our building in detail close up, this layering of different brickworks. Here we experimented with windows and with bricks. We only use one type of brick, but by changing the color of the mortar, the joint lines, by changing it from dark to light, I mean, it looks like we've done a very complex brick tapestry. The windows as well, I don't have pictures of the windows. We developed a window which could be set 10 centimeters behind the facade, flush with the facade, or 10 centimeters in front of the facade, so that the facade also has a depth. That's my last image of Haarlem. I'd now like to make a very big jump to Albania, where we are also currently working on a number of urban plans. We are here not in the capital city of Tirana, but way up in the Albanian mountains, almost on the border to Greece or the border to Macedonia. Incredible archaic landscape, which I'm very, very fond of. We're looking at the city of Kocha, a small city of maybe 100,000 people. We won an international competition for a master plan for the city center of Kocha 4 years ago. This is Kocha, a city much influenced by the occupation of the Ottomans. It has mosques and it has Christian churches. And it has a very, very dense scale of traditional buildings with stone facades and red roofs. Kocha was lucky enough to have a very visionary mayor who, very early on after the collapse of communism, borrowed money from the World Bank and redid all the city infrastructure below the streets and used the opportunity to repave the streets in brick cobblestones, which gives the whole center of the city a very strong historic character. This mayor was the same one who then organized the international competition. The competition was for the center of the city. One sees here the question marks, all the sites to be addressed. The bigger black objects are housing blocks from the communist time, which one sees completely have changed the scale of the historic villas. This is our master plan, which won the competition, which shows in red where we thought new buildings could be built. There's here a new cathedral, a Greek Orthodox cathedral. Part of our master plan was to landscape the cathedral square. Then we took the traffic out of this street to make a pedestrian boulevard. We proposed a very big building in this square, this triangular square, to be the counterpart of the cathedral. They didn't want to build a big commercial building there, so we've now developed a different scenario. This is part of our master plan for culture, scenographic urbanism, a sketch of all our new interventions in the delicate scale of the historic city. A wooden model of the same concept. This is the central street where we took the cars out with big mature trees and the cathedral at one end. The cathedral was built after communism by the Greek Orthodox Church. This is part of our landscaping of paving the central boulevard. I'm a very happy elderly culture man and some leftovers from the communist time, the sculptures in the background. We like very much this collage of different times of the city. This is a museum building with very rich stonework and our new paving of the pedestrian street. Happy culture girls dancing, Albanian girls dancing on our paving. We relocated the national freedom fighter from a traffic island to having his own fountain. So here we are actually mixing in with the inherited iconography of the city. One sees in the background the regional government headquarters, the communist building, and then a very fine little 19th century facade on the left. This is our newly repaved street, a photograph taken early in the morning. I like very much these atmospheric pictures of a newspaper standard, a typical urban scene. I think what one is doing here is introducing urban life to an existing city. This is a communist library which caused the demolition of a church, and we discovered this from our researchers in culture. We then folded the facade of the church flat on the paving and paved it at a scale 1:1. So the memory of the missing church is still there in the ground plane of the city. This is like a form of graffiti on the surface of the city. And here a communist statue which looks as if it's lying on top of the church plan. This was a zone of very dense villas, most of which are falling down in a very bad state. Unfortunately, lots of people from Albania have been working in Greece, have made money in Greece, and want to come back and demolish their family house and build a new apartment block. We here developed strategies for hopefully maintaining some of these historic villas by combining 2 or 3 different plots. So if one person kept their villa, they could also share in the profit of their neighbour's development. This proved to be a strategy which is very difficult to explain to Albanians who have absolutely no experience of urban planning. So for this we're left with our scenographic urbanist sketches of a dense mix of new architecture and historic villas. But what we're talking about here is urban atmosphere, obviously. This is part of our new and old formula, the Cathedral Square, the big commercial building which didn't get built. And then the master plan was 4 or 5 years ago. They implemented that and then called us back to do the last square, the triangular square. We proposed a lookout tower here, but this didn't have enough urban presence for them. So we proposed a bigger tower. We called this one the Red Bar in the Sky. And the mayor, or the current mayor of Korçë, found a Greek company who built ice skating rings. I think it doesn't sound like a very good business, building ice skating rings in Greece. But the mayor absolutely wanted to have an ice skating ring, and we persuaded him to build our Red Bar in the Sky, which they built last year and finished it for Christmas. They built it in record time, in 2 or 3 months. This is the Red Bar in the Sky in Korçë in Albania, a piece of urban acupuncture with their Christmas decorations. This is on a less festive day. red bar in the sky, or this thin pin tower. So, and the intention is that it turns Corcia into a sort of Albanian San Gimignano. These are images which the city of Corcia used to publicize their tower. It actually caused a political scandal in Albania, where the ex-Prime Minister called it the Tower of Shame, and the current Prime Minister calls it the first step in his promised renaissance. So I think here one sees urban planning as a very important, or having a very important role in politics. These are the plans of our red bar in the sky. You see it's a very simple fire escape stair and a lift. Sort of, normally one sees these towers on building sites, and it's always a very spectacular moment when they stand alone. So the red bar in the sky is a lift and a stair and a platform on top. This is the view from the top of the red bar in the sky. One of the squares we've replanned with parking spaces and a mixture of public and traffic spaces. New paving. We've taught the Albanians how to use or implement stone paving. This is a little pavilion next to the red bar in the sky where you can hire skates for the ice skating ring. It's made from traditional stonework and with a concrete roof. This is the Deputy Prime Minister of Albania at the top of our tower, overlooking the city of Corcia. I think the fact that such a small building can have a major role in politics is for us very interesting. We've persuaded them in Corcia that this tower is a very important urban planning tool. From the top of the tower you can survey the whole city, and one can see where it would be seriously wrong to build new taller buildings. One can see in the background there are uncontrolled buildings have been built here and here, but on this side the city has the historic scale. This is a plan of the center of Corcia, updated from our master plan competition time, with new squares which we are now planning. There's one, they have a bazaar. There's a bazaar here. This is the bazaar. This is a mosque. We've done the cathedral square and now the mosque square, and another square down here. We plan these squares by first a photo of the bazaar, very orientalist. This is a roof we're planning in the center of the bazaar. The entrance to the mosque with an Albanian man and woman walking on the street, and the red bar in the sky. I think that's the last. Yeah, that's the last image in my lecture. I've had to race through. I apologize for that, but there's lots of stories to tell, and we are talking here about scenographic urbanism, about urban narratives, about a readable city. I think, or I hope I've managed to communicate the way we work and the results of our working on various European cities. So thank you very much. Questions? If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, Peter. I'm not sure if there's any questions from the audience. And if not, thank you very much for coming, and we will continue with the next conferences that within this series that we're organizing with the foundation and with different institutions that we will continue doing in Barcelona and also in other cities. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you, Peter.